Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. I'm Carol Massar, along with Emily Graffeo, in for Tim Stenovec, who is out today. Listen, holiday season, we talk a lot about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, people shopping, and so on and so forth. But a big part of the holiday season is about giving and giving to foundations, organizations, and to folks who really need it.
Yeah, and for some individuals in America, that means making an impact through volunteering or philanthropic efforts. I'm thinking about those individuals that are much higher income and have perhaps more to give. Bank of America surveyed 1,000 high net worth individuals across the country about how they're approaching philanthropy. And we're joined now by Dianne Chipps Bailey, National Philanthropic Executive at Bank of America Private Bank. She joins us on Zoom from Charlotte, North Carolina to discuss. So tell us about just the most recent giving by affluent households. What are you seeing right now in terms of trends?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share more about how wealthy people are leveraging their capital to achieve their social impact goals. December is the moment. Giving season is in full tilt. 30% of all dollars will flow in December, with 10% on the last 3 days of the year. And what we're seeing with wealthy Americans is they're all in with their generosity. 91% of them are giving every year. That's compared to less than 50% of the general population. But they don't stop with their dollars. As you've already referenced, they're incredibly generous as volunteers, whether that's direct service, being on boards, fundraising for organizations, certainly also leveraging other tools like sustainable investing and conscious consumerism.
How much of this kind of pull towards more giving, what does it tell us, I guess, about the markets and the general health of the economy? We were just talking about university endowments, so like longer term investors are top of mind for me, and just how a lot of those endowments have not actually beaten the market. But I guess, what do you kind of see from your angle working within a private bank about how just the rise in the S&P 500 is really impacting all different facets of wealth?
It's a huge impact. If you want to look at an indicator of what giving will look like, look at how the strength of the markets are performing in December. There's a huge correlation between the generosity and the performance of the market. Certainly other economic factors are coming into play. Certainly inflation and interest rates, but we do believe that 2024 will be a really strong year for giving, coming on the heels of some tough years. We saw, 2021 was astronomical. That incredible generosity in response to the pandemic, calls for racial justice. But then 2022 was a really tough year. We saw a pullback in giving when adjusted for inflation, which is very unusual. We've only seen roughly 4 of those in almost as many decades. But we think that this will continue to be a really strong year.
What are we seeing in terms of generational differences or, men versus women? Tell us a little bit, if you can give us some idea in terms of giving along those lines.
The study of wealthy Americans has really powerful insights as it relates to the gender and also the generational differences in giving. I want to really double click on those generational differences, particularly as it relates to where they're giving. Of course, all wealthy Americans, regardless of their age, do prioritize basic and human needs above almost everything. Certainly religious giving is also an important driver of generosity. But when you look at areas of difference between the older and the younger generations, the older generations are much more likely to prioritize giving to religion, giving to veterans causes, and the rising generation is very focused on education. They're obviously more proximate to their educational experiences, climate and the environment, and again, also those social justice issues are a real priority. When you look at the rising generation, it's so interesting with these affluent, wealthy individuals. They're more likely to be wealth inheritors. So that factors into some of these differences, but they're really don't shy away from publicity in their giving. They're less likely to give anonymously. They're much more likely to feel that their giving experience is enhanced by that recognition. And the reason why is, I believe, because they're not only honoring their name, but also the name of the family that originated and created wealth that they then inherited. And it's also just they're used to living their lives transparently. Certainly, if they're going to post on social media about their vacations and what they had for breakfast, why would they censor what they're doing philanthropically?
One thing I'm curious, because you mentioned, I think during the pandemic when things maybe weren't, that people weren't giving as much. I am curious though, going through the pandemic, George Floyd, and I feel like a lot of people, when they thought about their giving efforts, they really thought about both of those issues and both of those tragedies and stress points for our society. And I'm curious if you can give us any insight about that time and the type of giving that was going on and whether or not that's carried over until today.
So I'll reframe the conversation around the pandemic era giving, the 2020 and 2021 giving. Those were very high years for giving. The generosity really soared, particularly in 2021, which was that year where you felt the full impact of the pandemic and the racial justice issues. It was 2022 when the markets were so volatile, having declines, interest rates and inflation soaring. It was 2022 where we saw the drop off in giving. And so the focus of giving in 2020 and 2021 continuing now? Yes and no. Basic needs are always a priority, but we've seen basic needs giving pull back to more common levels. So if you look at our study of philanthropy, the three most popular areas of giving in terms of proportionate giving would be religion, higher education, and then basic needs. If you look at incidence of giving, just popularity of gifts, not the size of the gifts, basic needs is the most popular category. But in 2020, basic needs was actually second instead of the third, where it usually is. And that's because of the attention from the headline. Wealthy Americans could live in a bubble, but they don't. They're very attentive to the needs of the day. And so we see a surge in giving in response to tragedies, whether they be the pandemic, natural disasters, mass shootings, Supreme Court cases, but their attention then will move on to the next headline.
All right, good to know, and I'm glad we were able to squeeze that in as well. Dianne, thank you so much. Happy holidays. Dianne Chipps Bailey, she's National Philanthropic Strategy Executive at Bank of America Private Bank, joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
We're talking a lot about inflation. We're talking about it from a few different angles. Makes sense ahead of this week's Fed decision and meeting. On that and on pricing, Bobbie, it's the mom-founded and led infant nutrition company, recently announcing a sweeping 15% price reduction for its classic organic infant formula, available online. They sell it in Target and Whole Foods nationwide. The price reductions are, in the company's own words, an active step on behalf of the mom-led company to support families who are experiencing rising costs of living, which is something we talked about with Peter Atwater of William & Mary, who is someone who coined the K-shaped economy and recovery. So great to have back with us Laura Modi. She's co-founder and CEO of Bobbie, and joining us here in our studio. So great to have you here. How are you?
Thank you. Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm ready for the holiday season.
We are too. Tell us about those price cuts in an environment where there's still inflationary pressures. Why and how are you doing it?
I know the how is the big one.
Yeah.
It was very intentional. I'll bring you back. Everyone remembers the infant formula shortage of 2022. We made a very intentional decision to buy manufacturing at the time and to invest in the heartland of the country and really own our own production. I mean, the initial goal was really to own our own quality control, production control, also to be in a place where we had resilient supply. God forbid there was another shortage, we were in a position to be able to serve the market.
So you wanted to have supply right here in the U.S. market.
Correct.
Yeah.
The industry wasn't resilient enough. America wasn't resilient enough. We were at a point where America wasn't able to feed babies. Now, through that investment, which has taken an entire 2 years, a lot of capital and a lot of time, we knew that if we did it right, we could also reduce the costs as well. And I rewind to that moment and being in a position of saying, if we got to that place, we would pass the savings over to our customers. And we're there.
How did you reduce the costs?
I mean, it's owned production.
Okay.
So you bring it in-house. You have your supply chain from a more local perspective.
So just not importing product has been
reducing
Okay.
imports.
Okay.
And, but also we were manufacturing a lot through using co-men. Through now our owned facility and opening up our own manufacturing and making those investments, they're starting to pay off. Just scale.
And why do that instead of using that extra money to, reinvest in the business, especially in an environment where all of your other competitors are still raising prices?
Yeah, I've had this debate now a few times. And, I'll first say, even as a mother of 4, I feel the inflation. I feel it. I feel it in grocery stores. You see it with basic pantry products. And I think the election was a big wake-up call that people were voting with their pockets. You saw it. Inflation is an issue. And I'm not making any product. We're feeding babies.
Yeah.
We are making one of the most important products out there. And it should also be, if you're able to, while not compromising on quality, also accessible.
Laura, based on what you are doing, and we've talked to various global architectural firms who talk about designing, building in Mexico, or closer, or even here in the U.S., closer to home. I'm curious, that you show that you can kind of do it, and it does impact the cost equation. What about labor, though? What about, I'm just curious about that argument, which has often been against moving things back here in the United States because labor costs are so high.
I mean, look, it takes having to take several steps back. Initially, the costs are high, investment needs are big, but over time, you see that returned. And we have. I mean, yes, our investments have been substantial, but over time, being able to centralize it, keep it close to home, have fewer steps in the process, you should be able to see costs go down.
Is it all automated? Forgive me, because I did talk about the cost of labor, but how much of the process is automated?
No, I mean, we have a lot of fabulous staff at our manufacturing facility. And, I will say nothing makes you feel more patriotic than seeing the manufacturing labor who is making this product one by one. It's incredible.
So this 15% price reduction on your classic organic infant formula, this came recently, but I'm wondering, how has business been in response to that move so far?
I'll first start just with the sentiment. It's the most rewarding. We didn't just roll this out for new customers. We have tens and thousands of subscribers who are receiving their product every month. They signed up for a particular price. And when we made the decision, we said, well, we're not just going to do this for new customers. We're going to retroactively change the price for our existing subscribers too. And it builds loyalty, love. We received, a ton of emails in response saying they've never seen a company do anything like this.
Tell us about subscribers and subscription. That is your model, right?
That is our model.
So what have you seen in general in that kind of growth? Prior to the price cuts, I'm just curious, since this is relatively new.
Infant formula is, it's repeatable, it's predictable.
Right.
But because of the infant formula shortage, there's been this PTSD and fear over not being able to get your product and supply. And you're feeding your baby. You want to know that your product is arriving to you when you need it and that there's never going to be a gap. So one of the things we implemented was guaranteed supply when you sign up for us. So as a subscriber, even if there's ups and downs in supply chain, even if you're not able to find it at Target, as a subscriber, you will always get a guarantee on your supply. We also rolled out...
How did you do that? How did you do that? Because that means you had to make sure you either had stuff in a warehouse or something.
It's modeling. It's all modeling.
Okay.
To put very simply, it's making sure that we're not bringing on subscribers at a rate that we can't replenish.
So you would have said maybe no to a subscription if it meant that you couldn't keep that promise.
Correct.
Okay.
And months ago, we were finding that you weren't able to sign up because we were trying to catch up with supply. But if you do sign up, we will guarantee that we will have that supply for you.
For how long?
for your entire journey. Yes. And we also implemented inflation-proof pricing as well, which through this rollout of reducing prices has been a promise that even if inflation goes up, and hey, we might go in another direction where the cost of our product will go up, but we will never change it on subscribers.
How do you do that though? What if your prices double?
Well, look, our prices may go up. They may. But for our existing subscribers who signed up one day and they said, I'm signing up for a certain price and I expect it not to go up, we're going to promise them it won't. But for new customers, they may see a change.
Okay, interesting. Hey, the U.S. election outcome, I don't know, you run a business. You've got to be watching very closely. Everyone we talk to is just trying to kind of game this out. What are the issues that are top of mind for you as you look and get ready for a second Trump White House?
You know, I think with the infant formula space, we're seeing a lot of talk around making America healthy again. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there should be a bigger push on this. We've been so focused on the next election and not the next generation. What are they consuming? How are we raising standards? What is the quality of our own supply chain, food, nutrition? And I am watching this very closely in hopes that we're going to see a bigger shift towards a healthier country.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, maybe for people who aren't familiar with Bobbie and your product, what makes it different than other baby food formula?
Purposefully sourced. At the end of the day, infant formula needs to match breast milk. So the same carbs, proteins, and fats, your baby needs to get the same nutrition. That's really important. But where those ingredients come from, the quality of both how it's produced and it's the sourcing, making sure that everything from how it's extracted to where it's farmed, we are one of the only USDA organic infant formulas on the market.
Laura, you know, one thing I think about with I feel like, Emily, this may come in front of you. I know Tim and I have a lot of conversations about this, but with climate change and how that is impacting certainly farmers, food production around the globe. How has that become more complicated, if it has at all, in terms of what you guys are doing?
It has gotten more complicated, but I still think the uncertainty, the unknowns are ahead of us. So we're just watching it closely.
Meaning it could get worse.
It could.
You expect it to get worse.
Yes.
Going back to, we talked about the Trump administration, Robert F. Kennedy, his nomination to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Yes, there's vaccine skepticism by some, but there's also his concerns, as you said, that you referenced earlier, about our food supply and how food is made. Your knowledge and experience of going through this process, co-founding this company, running this company, what have you learned about how food is produced in the United States, be it infant formula or just in general? What can you share?
You stumped her a little.
Yeah, you did actually. And you know what's interesting about this question? At the end of the day, we have to turn to food. And I feel this deeply in the world of infant formula. Creating fear and fear-mongering is not a game anyone should be in. I think it's really, really important. Availability, affordability, just access is important. The private sector, like myself, it's our responsibility to raise the bar. But we have to be very careful in how we are growing and improving standards, and at the same time, not having people walking around fearing everything they're picking up.
Right.
So I am very hopeful that the awareness of raising the standards is out there. And while we're doing it, let's also give each other a little bit of grace around what we're eating today.
Are the standards too harsh then on what goes into baby food formulas, or are they too lenient?
Another big debate we could go into for hours. It depends on what standards you're talking about. I think from a nutrition standpoint, we should be looking a lot harder at what the latest science is. We should be trying to remove regulatory hurdles to get in new and better ingredients. And at the same time, we also need to raise the regulatory barrier to make sure the quality and safety of the product continues to have oversight. You want your product to be high quality and safe at the same time. You shouldn't be compromising one for the other.
Interesting perspective. Laura, thank you so much.
Of course.
Are you finding all the funding you need? Can you stay private?
You know, I hope so, for as long as we need.
Good stuff. Look forward to another update soon down the road. Laura Modi, co-founder and CEO of the baby formula company Bobbie. Really great perspective and take on her industry, and just fascinating to see what they were able to do in terms of pricing in an environment where it's not always so easy.
And female founded and a mom led company.
Yeah, love that.